Hello, and welcome to this bite-sized session from the Sussex Collaborative. I'm Joe Lynch, one of the members of the Collaborative and a specialist in marketing and strategy development. Today, we're going to be talking about the new IR35 regulations, which is not my area of expertise at all. I'm therefore delighted to be joined by Lucy Tarrant. Lucy is the founder, a solicitor, and the managing director at Cognitive Law, which is a modern values-based law company based in Brighton with a nationwide network of solicitors. She's the president of the Sussex Law Society and has a very deep specialism in the fields of employment and recruitment law. I'm also delighted to say that Lucy is a member of the Sussex Collaborative. Lucy, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Joe. Yes, it's embarrassingly one of my specialist subjects is at IR35. I shouldn't probably claim that in public. It can be a bit of a conversation stopper, but not on this occasion.
That's all right. We all have our system there. So, in a nutshell, for the uninitiated, what is IR35, Lucy?
Well, it's actually been around for about 20 years. It's a piece of tax legislation, and it's called IR35 because it was number 35 from the Inland Revenue. So it's no more magical than that. And it was part of the Finance Act 2001. So it's a piece of tax legislation designed to make sure that self-employed people are truly self-employed and that they're paying the correct tax. That it's no more magical than that.
But there's been debate and discussion about when it's going to be enacted. Has there been any delay, or when does it come into force?
Well, I mean, as a piece of legislation, it's been around for 20 odd years. What has actually changed is what we call the off-payroll or the intermediaries legislation, which has shifted the decision-making process from the self-employed person to the company that ultimately pays them. So if I just quickly tell you what the current situation is, and then I can tell you what's changing. Currently, if you're self-employed, you make the decision as to whether you're truly self-employed or not. And then whomever pays you, they don't have any responsibility for your tax. You simply need to tell them I'm self-employed and they will pay you gross. And then it's up to you to pay your tax according to the law. What's happening with the new legislation, or a change in the legislation, is that the paying party has now got the obligation to determine whether you are employed or self-employed. So I think it's a bit of a daft piece of legislation, because you're asking the person who's making the payment to make the decision, not the person who's actually doing the work. But the government are doing it in order to catch lots of self-employed people that they think are not truly self-employed and who they think should be paying PAYE and national insurance contributions.
Okay, so what sort of questions would the company or the employer ask of the self-employed person?
There are three main pillars in order to remain self-employed. They are making sure that you have your own supervision, direction and control over the work that you do. So no one can tell you when or where or how to do it. You are given a project, you do that project, you deliver that project and you walk away from that project. Secondly, you have to have what we call no mutuality of obligations, which is a wonderfully incomprehensible phrase, which basically means I could walk away from this at any time. I just give you notice, I'm self-employed, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm going away. And equally, the client can say, you're rubbish, you leave now. So it's not like an employee when you have to give them the requisite notice and there are rights for the employee. It's what we call a completely independent relationship.
Okay.
And the third pillar is the right of substitution, which means that if I can't do the work for you, I can go and find somebody else who can. And only truly self-employed people can do that. So when you're assessing somebody's status as to whether they're subject to IR35 or not, those are the three things you have to consider.
Thank you, Lucy. That's a great summary. And I realise I think I cut across your your answer to my first question. When does this become law?
Well, the changes were due to come into effect at the beginning of the last tax year, so April 20. But because of the COVID pandemic, the government postponed it until April of this year. There has been some talk as to whether it will be postponed again, but I think that's highly unlikely for two reasons. Firstly, the changes have now been enshrined into law in the Finance Act 2020, which hadn't actually been through all of the parliamentary levels when it was actually postponed last time, so it was much easier to postpone. And secondly, because with the best will in the world, the government's going to need to claw back some money from somewhere. Mm-hmm. So it sees as an opportunity to claw back unpaid tax and national insurance, and I can't see if they're going to pass that chance up.
Okay, thank you. And I've heard mention of umbrella companies. What are they, and are they relevant to this law?
Very much so. Umbrella companies sit between the paying party and the self-employed person. So on the one hand, they're a very good way to shift liability down the chain. So if you're not sure whether you should be paying the tax, you can shift the decision making down to the umbrella company. They're also very good for people who may be sometimes doing a self-employed project and sometimes doing an employed project, so that they can ask the umbrella company just to deal with all of their tax and deduct it as appropriate.
Thank you. So who should be taking actions now? Should it be people who are self-employed but worried that they might not be deemed self-employed, or is it the companies that should be taking the actions now?
Everybody, absolutely everybody. If you're currently self-employed, you should be looking at whether you've been given a status determination statement by the person for whom you're doing the work, because that will determine whether you are inside of scope or outside of scope, and whether you should be paying personal tax at that level or not. For the clients, if they make the wrong decision, or they do so carelessly, they will be obliged to pay any tax that isn't paid by the self-employed person remaining self-employed. So it's incredibly critical that everybody understands what their responsibilities are in the chain.
But that's interesting. The tax liability sits with the company that's employing the consultant or the self-employed person, which is the major change, as I understand it.
That's right. So the paying party, and if you put this into recruitment terms, it gets more complicated, because a recruitment business may introduce a self-employed person to work for a client. The client pays the recruitment business, and the recruitment business pays the self-employed person. So you've got three people in the chain there. So that in that situation, the client makes the decision, the recruitment business does the paying, and the actual person who's doing the work has no control over the decision whatsoever. So it's really crucial that there is joined up thinking.
So what feels like a simple and honourable initiative has suddenly got quite convoluted and complicated. What should people do if they're at all concerned or haven't got everything in order ready for the new tax year? Who should they get in touch with?
Initially, they should speak to their accountant to make sure that they are accounting for their tax and national insurance in the correct way. But also they should speak to a solicitor to make sure that the contract that they have in place with whomever they're working for, or by whomever they're being paid, is watertight and has the correct obligations, and cognitive law can help with that.
And how can you get in touch with cognitive law?
The easiest way is by email, so contact me at lucy.tarrant@cognitivelaw.co.uk, or by telephone to the office, which is 0333 400 44 99, or, and this is only for Sussex Collaborative viewers, my personal mobile number, which is 07710 717 606. We're always there to answer questions. There's no such thing as a silly question when it comes to IR35.
Lucy, thank you. That's been a brilliant overview of something that's obviously going to affect many of the businesses that the collaborative work with and businesses nationwide. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for joining the Sussex Collaborative.
Absolutely, my pleasure, Joe. Thank you for having me.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, anyone would think we'd rehearsed that. Very good.
Perfect.
You're
Perfect.
a pro.